Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I just looked at the weather forecast, not in a great mood. It looks like I potentially might be done for the year up here in Wisconsin in terms of open water fishing. We've had some flurries already that have come through this year. It's early November right now, and I'm a little concerned that we're going to lock up here any day in terms of just freezing over. But if I can get out, I know one of my best baits to go with is going to be a jerk bait like this guy right here. This is just the Berkeley Stunna jerk bait, just their 112 size, because a jerk bait is just one of the best cold water baits. So I figured I would do a video just kind of on the real key jerk bait juicy tips, like just those ones that I think a lot of times go very, very underappreciated because the jerkbait, in my opinion, is probably one of the most difficult baits to use. Yeah, you can throw it out. Yeah, you can straight retrieve it. Yeah, you can just jerk it. But if you don't truly understand the fundamentals of it, you're not going to catch as many fish as you should. So I want to do a quick video on just like the main points. I could do full videos on each of these little segments, but I'm going to talk about like the 5 tips just that are going to really increase your success with the jerkbait if you understand these. So the first one really comes down to the bait itself. You need to identify like how the jerkbait reacts. So almost all jerkbaits on the market are going to be called a suspending jerkbait. Very, very few suspend perfectly, and even when they do, a lot of times with water temperature change, the bait might begin to float. If the water temp gets warmer, it might sink. If it's cooler, it really depends on where you're at. But just know that most jerk baits, even though they say suspend, don't ever actually suspend. Most are made to have a slow rise or a slow sink. The Stunna has a slow sink, which is something that I love when I'm fishing really cold water temps. I want something that will go back to the fish versus coming out of their wheelhouse, because generally when it's really cold, their strike zones shrink. So I like to have a very slow sinker, which is why I like this bait. But the number one thing that an angler needs to recognize is, what type of jerkbait are you throwing? What does it do when you just put it in the water? Does it slow sink? Does it slow rise? Is it a perfect suspender on that day? That's like the most important thing just to know right off the bat. And the reason for that is because you need to know then how to adjust it if it's not doing what it is that you want to do. Meaning you need to know how to add weight or take weight off. Generally, if you're looking to take weight off, the best thing to do is to change the hooks out to a slightly smaller size or a thinner wire, a thinner diameter hook. You'd be amazed at how a tiny, tiny change in weight can affect it. So you may not have to change all 3. You change one hook of the 3, and that should be enough weight removed or increased to change that bait's movement. So it is very important to understand that. There's a lot of good ways to add weight other than just adding hooks. You can get some lead wrap, you can get lead tape, um, you can add split rings if you want to add an extra split ring off the hanger. Again, I can't stress enough. We're talking very, very small amounts of weight, either added or subtracted, but that will have a major impact on what direction this guy goes. So the next then is your line choice. Your line choice will have a very big impact on the bait's performance in the water. In a nutshell, the lighter the line, the deeper your bait's going to go. But not just that, you're going to get more movement out of your bait. You will get better slashing motion with lighter line. If you go with heavier line, you're going to reduce the depth your bait gets because that line is preventing your bait from getting deeper. And you're also going to decrease the amount of movement because that line, the heavier line, will create drag in the water and not allow the bait to dart quite as much. There are times you want more darting motion. There are times the fish don't want as much darting motion. So again, you need to recognize that your line choice plays a big part. That's one reason why I throw my jerk baits on spinning gear, because I like to fish it on 6-pound test. I like to fish on spinning gear because then that also helps me throw the bait much further. Plus, I feel much more confident in a good drag system that I've got on my Abu Garcia reels, so that when a fish makes a run with a 6 pound test and maybe one treble hook hanging out of their mouth, I feel very confident that my drag's going to go with them versus as smooth as maybe on the bait casters. I feel like I tend to potentially break off more, or more so pull the hooks out with bait casting gear because the rods are generally a little stiffer. Personal preference. You can do whatever you want. I'm probably in the minority with the spinning gear, but I feel like it really helps my bait get deeper because I can make longer casts and I can use much lighter line. Again, the key here is you want to recognize how your line size, your choice really comes into play here. If you generally, I would say most people like fluorocarbon, but if you prefer braid or prefer monofilament, that's also going to impart the action because you're not going to, fluorocarbon sinks, braid, mono have a floating tendency. So from that standpoint, you're not going to get the same depth with either of those lines. You're going to lose a lot of your stretch if you go with braid. You get more stretch if you go with monofilament. I feel like fluorocarbon is probably, without a doubt, in my opinion, the best line to go with. But it doesn't mean you have to. Remember, as I always say on this channel, confidence is key. If it's working for you, stick to it. These are just my suggestions. So, line choice. The fourth thing to think about is your bait color. In a nutshell, there are tons and tons of colors out there. It can be extremely overwhelming to choose colors. The simplest way to break it down is based on the actual basically your translucentness or the opaqueness of your bait. Translucent meaning you can see through it. This is the Northern Lights color. It's translucent. I can see right through it. You can probably see my hand waving through it. Generally speaking, translucent is going to be much, much better for you in clear water. The clearer the water, the more translucent you want to get, with kind of just your accent colors built in like this, little chartreuse on the bottom, little dark green on the back. But the bait does a very good job at blending in with that clear water. Does not allow the fish to get a great look at your bait. Now, vice versa, if you're fishing darker water, maybe a little stain to it, maybe a little mud to it, you want to go with something that's much more opaque, a solid color, something that'll throw off more color and give the fish a better idea of where it's at, so you can help them identify it and find it. That's really what it comes down to, your colors. Color choice after that, a lot of it is preference, a lot of it is up to the angler, a lot of it is up to the region of the lake or the country that you're in. But it really comes down to, if you're going to keep colors at the most simple, it's whether it's translucent or whether it's opaque, and you're just looking at water clarity. That's what it's going to come down to. The last thing, guys, and potentially the most underappreciated, is your cadence. And what I mean by that is the actual way you're retrieving that bait. It is amazing to me, and something that we see a lot with forward-facing sonar now, how the fish react to a certain cadence. There are way too many jerkbait anglers that go out there, they throw the cast out, and they jerk the bait back in the same rhythmic pattern that they do on every cast. Maybe it's jerk, jerk, pause, jerk, jerk, pause, and they do that every cast. I really strongly recommend you to go out and play around with multiple different cadences. Jerk, jerk, pause, 15 jerks, a long pause, whatever it is. Play around with it, because on most days, you will find that one cadence is producing better than others. And that cadence can change not just from day to day. It could change from hour to hour. It could change from location to location. But most really good jerkbait fishermen out there pay extremely close attention to the rhythmic pattern that they were employing into that jerkbait that generated that strike. If you just get out there and you just kind of get into your pattern, your that cadence that you always do, you're not going to identify if there's a better cadence on that day. It is definitely something to play with, especially if you do tend to use only one style of retrieve and you're not getting bit. Change it up right away. Man, I'm not necessarily saying, for I think if you want to do it the best way, you should change it up every couple of casts. But I also would say that, if that's too much for you, you just want to go out and not worry about that. If you haven't been bit in 15 or 20 minutes, you absolutely should try a different cadence. I mean, it really can make a huge impact, and it's something that so often goes underappreciated by anglers out there who want to catch fish on jerkbaits. So those are 5 really key tips, guys. I could break each one down into a 10-minute video, but I just want to keep this short and sweet as to these are things you have to be aware of to really increase the number of bites that you get when you're out jerkbait fishing. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.